In the name of the one who creates, redeems, and continues to sustain us. Amen. Please have a seat. Consider your own call. Brothers and sisters and non-binary people. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, things that are not, to reduce to nothing things that are. One of the most prominent theological divides in our contemporary mainline Protestant churches, and one of the ones we identify or articulate the least often, is between those whose belief, conscious or unconscious, is that God is ultimately impartial, equitable, and equally loving of all people, and those who do not believe that. There are those who believe that God's love extends to each person equally, no matter what. This theology has been used for great good. For example, in the past couple of decades of debate and struggle about sexuality in the church, to be able to say God loves everyone and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do or say to change that has been intensely empowering for many people kicked out of their churches and of church life in general. We see signs saying all are welcome, and translated into Southern, y'all means all. Madeleine L'Engle once described this as, I have a point of view, you have a point of view, God has view. The primary theological challenge to this way of thinking is the incarnation. The full realization of the presence of God in Jesus, because in that instance, God picked one body with specific limits. Not all bodies everywhere, all time. And we don't believe that that choice was random. That God just one day said, all right, next guy that's born, that's it. That's the one I'm in. In our tradition, we say that there was anticipation, prediction, and choice. When God released the infinity of being God and was contained in the person of Jesus. God did not inhabit a king. God did not become an emperor. God didn't even get to be a reasonably comfortable middle-class person who got to have nice elementary school teachers like I did. God was contained within and grown from an unwed teenage woman disgraced, and under no man's protection. She was poor and in her culture sexually shameful. She could not materially support this baby, and she and her fiancé were refugees who had to flee persecution. We know that God was born homeless, and we don't know what kind of situation he ended up in his childhood and teen years. We know that by the time he was an adult, he really cared about everyone getting enough food and drink, possibly because he himself had known hunger. We know that whatever he had seen and whoever he had met, and whatever action he had taken, whatever violence he had witnessed living in an occupied country, whoever his friends were, caused him to utter these words. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Something in his lived experience caused those words to emerge. We know that by the time he was an adult, he was such an existential threat to the state that they had to kill him so the people didn't rise. And the way God was executed was reserved for criminals who committed harm to the Roman Empire, the state. It's a really labor-intensive way to kill someone, and they don't actually have a lot of trees in Palestine. So they did save it for special cases. They would line the roads in and out of the major cities with the crucified as warnings. Don't resist. Don't revolt. Don't fight back. Because this is what will happen to you. And then we know that that body rose again. We know that that resurrected body was no respecter of walls. That scarred body ate, drank, reassured, prayed, and then left again. When God came in the specific person of Jesus, God fully was that foolishness and that weakness, that lowness and that despised state. And this is the argument on the other side, that God chooses something specific, that God took a side in an irrevocable way in becoming human, that God is not perfectly impartial, that God picks and chooses. And we all know how dangerous this can get, right? In some hands, and we hear this in our country, this means that God chooses men, God chooses America, God chooses the prosperous, and God chooses white people. In other hands, this theology means that God chooses the poor and the homeless, refugees, those on welfare, those picking through garbage heaps for meals, those in the two-thirds world living on $2 a day, those who are tortured and exiled. On this Sunday, after this particular week. I'd like you to think for a minute about where you fall on this theological spectrum. It's admittedly oversimplified. But I'd like you to think about it because we're about to have our annual meeting and we're going to talk about where we want to go as a congregation and who we want to be as God's people in this place at this moment. And our answer to this matters. Our answer to this question matters in relationship to how we align ourselves in the next year and in coming years. Do we believe that God chooses? Is one of those options easier than the other? What is required of us if we believe in the absolute equanimity of God? What then do our commitments become? What is required of us if we believe God has chosen? What then do our requirements become? I invite your best thinking and your most honest and beautiful hearts on this as we move forward this year. Because all of a sudden, it matters a lot. You matter. We matter. God matters. And I pray that we're careful and clear about who we are and what we believe.